Hello and welcome back to Topics in Ancient World History. Today we're going to be continuing our exploration of this key concept, Christianity, based on the core beliefs about the teachings and divinity of Jesus of Nazareth, as recorded by his disciples, drew on Judaism and Roman and Hellenistic influences. All right, so we're going to stop it here because this is where we're kind of transitioning, right, kind of into the last part of that sentence. So looking at Judaism and Hellenistic influences. So in the last video, we looked at the notion of the immortality of the soul and kind of looking at the Greek part of the Hellenistic influences. And before I get going too much, let me just run my disclaimer. Right, I'm a high school teacher attempting to apply the curriculum framework. I'm not a professor of history, philosophy, theology, etc. Right, I am not a theologian. Please consult your own personal parents, priests, reverends, deacons, ministers, etc. for matters of questions of faith in your own personal life. All right, good. So in the last video we talked about we made some kind of Greek connections and kind of made that Hellenistic connection. So Hellenism, if you're not familiar with that, right? Hellenistics is a concept that comes post Alexander the Great, after the creation of that empire. And we see this, blending of different cultural civilizations. So Greeks and Persians and Egyptians and South Asian and etc. Right. So when you talk Hellenistic, it can mean any number of things. All right. So if you're talking about the Mediterranean world and Greek influences, on Christianity, there are a number of different, different groups that existed in the early years of Christianity. Neoplatonism was simply one that I talked about in the last video. But you also have a number of others that are out there. Chaldean oracles, right, around the 7th century AD in Alexandria, right? Another kind of example of a Hellenistic syncretism that's blending Persian, Zoroastrian doctrines of social organization and the Egyptian cults and Jewish traditions and wisdom. Gnosticism is obviously out there and fully developed by the 2nd century AD, right? So they believe that the material world is created by an emanation of the highest God, trapping the divine spark within the human body. So this divine spark can be liberated by gnosis or having knowledge. You've got dualistic Manichaeanism over in Sasanian Persia at this time. A derivation of Gnosticism, and giving rise to the Nestorian Church. We've already kind of talked about some of that stuff, or you could go into those as being influential. But let's kind of go a different way, and let's just talk about Zoroastrianism, right? So something you may or may not be that familiar with, right? And if you're talking about Zoroastrianism, how would Zoroastrianism have an influence, right? This is a religion that predates Christianity and is in a different part of the world of Christianity. I just want to try and make that connection here. So Zoroastrianism, right? Obviously, we kind of think of Persia when we think of that, or going back much further than that, right? But in Mesopotamia, the Tigris Euphrates river valleys, right? Or even further east of that, into modern day Iran, Afghanistan, all right? So when we think of Zoroastrianism, so how would this come into to influence Christianity, or even before that Judaism, right? And just as a kind of a quick little maybe a contextual connection here, or maybe just a little synthesis connection here. Remember that Judaism undergoes an event known as the Babylonian captivity about a little over 2,500 years ago, right? So you could definitely say that a contact was created during that time, right? So a connection was made during that time, in which Jews 2,500 years ago would have had pretty direct contact with Zoroastrian, Zoroastrian ideas and beliefs, and following the end of the Babylonian captivity. So think like Cyrus the Great of the Persian Empire, right? The Jews would have lived under Persian rule, right? So there would have been that continued Zoroastrian contact. So important concepts that are part of Christianity, right? That are part of Christianity, that are also part of Zoroastrianism. So I'm not trying to make a connection to say that they come from Zoroastrian. I'm simply saying that there are similarities that exist between Zoroastrianism and Christianity, and there was a connection between the two in that Judaism 500 years before the creation of Christianity came into direct contact with these ideas, and for hundreds of years there was a persistence of contact. So you can draw those connections how you want. I'm simply saying that there are similarities, right, between them. So important concepts that exist within Zoroastrianism: this notion of redemption, that mankind is ultimately good, and that has this goodness will finally triumph over evil. Zoroastrianism believes that there will be a final judgment, right? There's an apocalyptic aspect to Zoroastrianism. So when a person dies, they will go to heaven and hell, depending on their deeds during their lifetime, right? Life after death, right? The path of righteousness leads to peace and everlasting happiness in heaven. Zoroastrianism believes in this, a version of a Satan, right, as God's enemy. Right, so the destructive spirit. They believe in a resurrection. Right, Zoroastrianism believes in a resurrection. When all mankind chooses the former over the latter, evil will finally be defeated, and paradise on earth will be realized. Right, there is this understanding and belief of souls that the path of righteousness leads to peace and everlasting happiness in heaven, or a path of evil leads to a misery or ultimately hell. Hence, there is dualism that exists within Zoroastrianism. So Her Mazda, right, who is perfect, abides in a heaven, right? So Angra Mainyu dwells in the depths, all right? And you also have a similarity specifically within Islam to Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrians pray 5 times a day, right? And in both Christianity, in many branches of Christianity and Islam, there's also this other similarity, that angels, right, exist, so holy immortals, right? So there are similarities, right, that do exist. And how much of these similarities, or what are these similarities? When you look at Hellenistic influences, do you see Hellenistic influences, within the actual texts of the books of Christianity? In the Old Testament, in of the Holy Bible for Christianity, you have Hellenistic leaders and events of the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires are directly referenced. So specifically in the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verse 20, the male goat, right, referencing the king of Greece, the great horn between his eyes, referencing Philip II, that is the father of Alexander the Great, right? The horn was broken in this place which 4 others arose. 4 kings shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. Right, so Alexander the Great, right, being referenced here. His empire that he creates being divided following his death. And of course, the 2 most significant divisions of that will be Egypt, Ptolemaic lands, and Persia, right, Seleucid Persia, what eventually becomes. So in the book of Daniel, the king of the south, right, that's referring to the Ptolemaic kings. Egypt, right? The king of the north, right? Referring to the Seleucid Persia, all right? Regarding the book of Daniel, right? 167 BC, right? BCE is the date in which historians believe the book is written, right? As all the apocalyptic predictions made are correct up to that date. But Daniel gets the 164 BCE, the cleansing of the temple, after the Maccabean revolts, right? To remove the Greek influence from the temple. The origins of Hanukkah, right, gets that wrong, right? So this is, this event, right? This event is viewed as a Jewish reaction against Hellenism. And some scholars believe that Jesus' apocalyptic teachings, with the central message that Jesus intended to impart, is a continuity of this, right, of this tradition. Right. So this is just one way of kind of looking at Judaism and the Hellenistic influences within Christianity. Right. All right. So in the next video, we will look at the spread of Christianity through missionaries and merchants. Sapriati.